Did you notice what's different in the workout room? You probably didn't. It's okay. It's so much brighter. Check it out. I installed 16 lights. Good morning. Welcome to week 12. Heavy push day. I can't believe we're week 12 already. This is the second week that we'll be on our new routine, our push-pull legs routine, and we're still evaluating the new workout app that we just tried. We just started trying out this app called Heavy last week. So this week will be a really good test because we have 1 week of workouts entered. So we'll be able to see what does it look like when we're in a workout today, when we're going through each exercise and marking it off. What does it look like to be able to, can we easily find what we did last week? Can we easily get to the charts for progressive overload and whatnot? Because that's my main evaluation criteria. If you watched the video last week, the free app I was using already did most of the stuff I wanted it to do. I just wanted it to be a little bit snappier, a little bit quicker, and I wanted it to be able to have a easier way of finding the progressive overload tracking and to be able to do that while I'm in a workout. So we'll also talk about, did you notice what's different in the workout room? You probably didn't. It's okay. It's so much brighter. Check it out. I installed 16 lights this past week. That's what I decided to do with the remainder of my holiday break, was go nutso on lights, because the camera I have doesn't do well in low light. It has a low light setting, but I wanted to be able to shoot with a custom exposure settings, and having a bright room with consistent lighting seemed like it was going to help with that. So I don't know if you will actually be able to notice the difference on a YouTube video, but I can sure notice a difference this morning. It feels brighter. Hopefully that'll lead to a little bit more energy. I don't know, we'll see. So we'll talk a little bit about what I did, how I installed these and stuff like that while we're waiting and doing our rest time during the workout. So let's hit it. We're doing heavy push today. Just to review, our heavy push day consists of bench press, seated dumbbell shoulder press, weighted dips, lateral raises, and we finish with tricep pushdowns. We still do our regular warm-up, 50%, 50%, 75%. So I've got 135 loaded. Let's hit our first warm-up set. All right. Warm-up set 2. All right, warm up set 3. All right. If you're new to the channel, welcome. My name is AJ, and I am just a regular guy. I'm a software engineer by day. I like nerdy things like Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, and I also care about being physically fit and looking good, having an aesthetically pleasing body composition. So the goal of this channel is to help other people who might resonate with who I am and what I'm after. And what I try to do is break down the complexity around getting in good shape and make it as simple as possible. And I do this by just explaining what I do, by just showing you what has worked for me, what I'm currently doing, and how I keep things simple. So if this is helpful to you, I hope you like the video, hope you subscribe to the channel. I hope you stick around and let me know how it helps you, or if how it doesn't help, if you have questions and all of that. Well, our warm-up has done its job and I am feeling decently warm. That's a good thing. That is literally the job of the warm-up, is to warm the body up. I had a college track coach. He used to say that the goal of a warm-up is to get you to start sweating. You haven't actually warmed up if you haven't started to sweat. So I think that's a pretty good indication. Now for me, I kind of cheat because I feel like I have a condition where I sweat too much. So I sweat very easily. So it was always very easy for me to be like, I'm warm. Well, I sweat when I play guitar. So anyway, let's get this first set of bench press. We've got 255 loaded on here. Last week we did two sets of 4 and 1 set of 5. And so I think I'd like to pick up at 5. I'm feeling good in the warm up. So we'll see if we can get to 6 and move up and wait. It felt like a little bit of a stretch, but I just was feeling good, wanted to take advantage. We got 6, so we'll pump up weights, see how that goes. So why did I update the lighting in this room? Did I overdo it? These are all good questions. It started out with a simple reason. If you remember, maybe you do, maybe you don't. I'll show a screenshot maybe. I used to have just a single light bulb in the middle of this room. And these ceilings are really low. They're like 7 feet, just barely over 7 feet. So this light bulb came down quite a bit. If you were a taller person, I'm only 5'10", but if you're like 6'2", you'd probably bump your head on it. So just didn't feel as safest to have a glass bulb hanging down in the middle of the weight room. And also it just wasn't super bright. It interfered with recording. If that was on, it made the lighting weird. I still have a couple of LED panel lights that that's what I was using when I was filming, because if I could avoid it, I didn't want that middle light on. And so I think the lighting in my videos up to now have been fine, pretty shadowy in certain areas, especially when I do dumbbell work over on the side here. So the goal was just to, number 1, make it safer, get rid of that bulb. And number 2, make it brighter without having to lean on these panel lights that are either battery operated or they have to plug into an outlet. So I didn't want cables running all around. So I decided to install all new lights. And maybe I overdid it. Or maybe not. I don't know. It feels pretty good. Set 2, bench press. We were feeling strong, so we went for 6 on the first and we got it. So we've pumped up from 255 to 265. Would like to get 4 of these. Oh, I keep on shaking the rack and my phone keeps falling, but man, that 4th one feels heavy. Well, I'll be interested to see if we can get it on the last one. So once I had decided I wanted to upgrade the lighting, I then entered a kind of discovery and planning phase. So luckily for me, that's the breaker box for the whole house right there. So I had pretty easy access to the circuitry. My initial thought was to just use the existing cable that was there for the single light because it went over to the light switch, and obviously that's kind of what I would want to do. But the more I looked into it, I discovered that circuit was a 20 amp circuit, and it feeds to upstairs, and it's probably not up to code the way that it was already wired. It's already wiring a bathroom and our dining room and our breakfast room, lights and outlets. So I'm going to leave that to a professional electrician to maybe break that into separate circuits at some point. So I decided to leave it alone. Plus, it was a heavier gauge wire, the 12-2, which I've worked with it before. It's just harder. It's thicker cable, thicker wire. It's harder to work with. And I knew I was going to be wiring up several, well, I didn't know at the time, but I knew I was going to be wiring several lights. So I decided to find another circuit. There's a bathroom on the other side of this wall. It's not doing much. It's literally just doing the bathroom. So I said, let's do that. 15 amp circuit, so I can use 14 gauge wire. Cool. So we'll come back and we'll talk about the actual planning stage. I was feeling good on the first two. I'm starting to definitely feel my pecs get tired. I do have my safety bars here. So if I can't get this up, I will be safe. It's not going to kill me. But it would be really great to be able to get 4 here. All right. Whoa. Whoa. Nope. Nope. Oh, well. Ugh. I know it's not glamorous to fail and sneak out the side, but I really wanted it. Maybe I moved up to 265 a little too soon. I don't know. Well, next week we'll see. All right, we've got seated dumbbell shoulder press. Last week started at 50, then I did 55, and then I did 60, and we're shooting for 8. So let's see. I'm feeling pretty tired from bench press. Let's see if we can get 8 with 60 pounds. Tired schmired. It's different muscles. It's the reason why we program our routines the way we do, so that we can move to a different muscle group after loading one up. We got our 8. Awesome. So after I figured out my circuit that I was going to use, I went to the internet to help me research what lights to do, how many lights, what brightness I needed. And there's a lot of stuff you can find. I researched everything. I considered putting LED strips up into the middle of the rafters, or the joists. You can see it's an open, maybe you can't. It is an open ceiling. When I first installed the weights in the power rack, I took out a drop ceiling that was in here to open it up. But so after fuddling around, is that a word, fuddling? I don't know. I also considered some 4 feet long LED flush mount strips. And after a while, I just landed on these wafer lights because they were going to allow me to have more flexibility in where I placed them and controlling them and all that and how many of them to do. So it's like I could do 2, I could do 3, I could do 6, 9, 12, whatever. So after that, I tried some online calculators to figure out how many lumens I needed. And so if each of these lights is 800 lumens, how many lights do I need to get to my desired brightness? And I had some mixed luck with that. I then went over to Claude, who is my AI assistant. And I basically asked Claude, I gave it the dimensions of the room, the layout of where the bench is, where my camera is normally, and what kind of brightness I was going for. And it helped me plan this out. And we started with, I think, 9, and then we went to 12. And then I was kind of just like, is there any reason? Because I wanted to be able to have lights not directly ahead of me here. So by going to, instead of 3 rows of 4, I wanted to go with 4 so I could have lights on either side of me. And I could have done 4 rows of 3, but I wanted to be able to space lights out so that I could have this one and this one straddle me in the position that I'm talking right now. So I just thinking about, where do I normally stand? I stand here, I lift weights, I lift weights back here. And so I didn't want any lights directly above me. I did want them coming from the sides and I wanted to be standing in the gaps essentially. And so a 4x4 grid ended up being the layout that worked. And then also Claude said that, hey, that might be a little bit overkill. That might be brighter. That's more of commercial gym brightness. And I was like, well, that's okay. I can just install a dimmer. And if it's too bright, I can always dial it back to 75% or 50% or whatever makes more sense. And in true Claude fashion, you're absolutely right. Spoiler alert, you're always right. That's the default response. But so I think I wanted to lean on the too much, knowing that with the dimmers, I can always pull it back. And then I didn't want to get into a position where, I only installed 9 lights and it's a little darker than I wanted. There's a gap over there. And then not being able to do anything about it after the fact. All right, second set of overhead presses for 3 sets of 8. Yes. So once I decided on the types of lights and the arrangement of lights, then I had Claude help me really get into the design of, how do I actually space these out? I have these joists that run this way. My camera's here, my power rack's here. I stand at this position and this position most often. I want to be able to control some of the lights separately to have a different light setting for when I do posing. And so Claude helped me design, I think it ended up being 18 inches, 38 inches, 60 inches, and 102 inches or something like that. So we got a good spread around, and then it's optimized for when I talk to the camera here and when I do my posing from back here. I've got different light settings. You'll see that later. I'll show you what that looks like, how I control the lights separately. But Claude's really cool because it can also give you artifacts, meaning it'll write code and it can be like visual code. So it gave me an SVG file with the actual design with each of the lights, and then I had it help me. I said, this is where the breaker box is, this is where the switch is. Help me design the wiring layout for 2 different lighting zones on 2 different switches. And it helped me do that as well. Super helpful. And then I numbered all the lights so that I could be organized when I was making my cuts later. Last set of shoulder press, and actually I need to check my actual plan. I think I have 8 reps in here because that might just be what I did last week. The actual plan might be for 6, so if that's the case, I'll have to move up in weight, but that's a problem for next week. All right, set 3, here we go. Sound like a horse. So I hope the lighting is better here than what it has been in the past. Dips has been one of the challenges with lighting, because before I couldn't really optimize for doing bench and stuff out front here while also doing bench work on the side and dips. So I guess I can barely see the screen here, so we'll see how it looks in post, right? We've got dips, 3 sets of 6 to 8. I've got 75 pounds loaded on here. Last week, that was the last set I did. I did 7 of these, so let's see. All right, we got 8. Oof. So just to keep the conversation going a little bit on this lighting design stuff. After I had everything designed, I went ahead and you see this? Maybe you can or not. This is where the light switch was and where it is. And so I pulled out the old light switch in the hole. And as I was cutting out the hole for a dual light switch, because again, I wanted to do dual zones, I realized studs too close together was not going to allow me to do that. So that sucked. And I thought long and hard about what to do to solve it. They make this really nice oscillating tool that cuts through drywall, and you can make really nice precision linear cuts out of wood. I don't have that tool, and I didn't want to go buy it. So I made I don't know, maybe as a genius or maybe stupid choice to chisel out the stud to make room for the 2 gang light switch box. And after many minutes, probably maybe even over an hour, after hitting my thumb several times, hitting my hand with the hammer, and then after ruining the drywall because I hit a hole in the drywall and had cut it too big, and I had enough room for the light switches. So then obviously I had to fix the drywall. That's why there's that big splotch of mud all around that. But that ended up being a bigger roadblock. I thought it was going to take me a couple of hours to get the initial wiring and switch in place, and it took me a day and a half. All right, set 2. I got to 8 at 75 pounds, so I added another 5 pounds, so I believe I'm at 80, 50, 60, 70, 80. And I need to get some heavier weights because I've got 2 25s, 2 10s, and 2 5s, and it's like, wouldn't it just be easier to use a 45 pound plate? Anyway, here we go. 7. So the light switch box and the stud, that was the first roadblock. The second roadblock was the wiring, figuring out how to get off of the 20 amp circuit onto the 15 amp circuit. And that involved tracking down the cable over the bathroom. And then I was going to have to cut it and splice it and get a feed off of that. So I turn off the breaker, I go to do that. I cut the wire, and luckily I didn't die. But I learned a lot there in this process, and I learned about what's called shared neutral circuits. So apparently the bathroom wire had more conductors in it than normal. Instead of just like the white, black, and neutral, it also had a red so basically what a shared neutral circuit is, you actually have 2 circuits on the breaker that are 15 amp circuits, and you've got your normal black ground and your neutral, and then there's another circuit that takes the red wire and that uses that as a load, and this uses the same white as the neutral and the ground. So it shares that neutral, so you create this big shared neutral circuit, but you have individual breakers for the hot or the load. So really interesting, but the damage was done. I had already cut it, so I had to move forward with splicing it, and it still seemed like after I analyzed the other circuit was it's basically just some receptacles out in the basement and the receptacle over here. So after analyzing the potential load between the 2 circuits, I still figured it was a much safer bet than going with the 20 amp circuit that goes upstairs to the bathroom. So I had a lot of fun splicing that cable together. I had to splice 4 wires instead of 3. I was able to feed through the new cable to the light switch through an existing hole, and then I ended up having to cut out a little bit of drywall because I was not able to get through the top of the stud. But it ended up being fine just to cut through that hole, come out the top to be able to feed the lights. But what a fun, interesting learning experience. So the first 2 days were kind of swallowed by troubleshooting the circuit, the initial circuit, the switch box, and the splicing of the new cable. So it took longer than expected, but we overcame. I was then ready to start running wire to all the places that I need to and figuring out how I was going to install the lights. Okay. Last set of dips. We've got 80 pounds. We did 7 on the last one. All right, so I figured out the whole situation, splicing the cable. Once I had the first cable or the first wire ran for the switch, I did go ahead and run the first wire to where the first light was going to be. I hooked up the switch, figured out a rudimentary, well, I didn't even mount it. I just wanted to hook up a junction box and a light and make sure I had power working, that it was working. So that was a good sign. All right, side lateral raises, set 1. So after I tested the first light, I did go ahead and I started installing a few junction boxes and planning out how the cable run was going to go. Claude had already helped me figure out where I would probably want to drill to get from one joist to the other. I went ahead and installed the second switch and ran the cable for that so that I knew where that was going to go, because I knew that that was going to be close to this second row of lights. And then I started figuring out, how am I actually going to mount these lights? And I was looking through my scrap wood. I had some spare plywood, some spare 2x4s, and then I needed to figure out, I had a couple of different thicknesses. I had 1/2 inch and 3/4 inch of plywood. And so I needed to figure out how I was going to get the spacing the same. I didn't want some of them to be this height and some of them to be this height. That's obviously an exaggeration, but I figured out I could use just a little jig. I used a piece of 2x4. I figured 1.5 inches was enough of a gap up into the joist so that the lights wouldn't be flush down or hanging out. But I also didn't want them too high inside the joist so that their beam of light was cut off and creating shadows from the joists. So 1.5 inches seemed like a good spacing, so I just created a jig with that, a clamp, and then just a cut off piece of 1/2 inch and 1/4 inch for the corresponding panel. So I did have to figure out how much 1/2 inch I had, how much 1/4 inch I had plywood, and figured out which lights were going to use which thickness. I opted for the thinner ones up in the front because I have some obstructions. There's some other cable runs going through, so I just wanted it to be a little bit thinner. So what I did was I went through and I labeled each. I had the numbers for each of the light, and so I just labeled which ones were 1/2 inch, which ones were 3/4 inch. I measured the joist, how wide that the cut needed to be, and then I went and I cut all the wood out, and I got a 6-inch hole saw drill and drilled the holes. Mounted all the mounting hardware and then installed the panels. And then the last thing that I did was to go through and just wire up all of the cables and then into the junction boxes, and then hook up the junction boxes to the lights, install the lights within the panels themselves. So all in all, not a super complicated process. It did take me a full week, but I think it really only took me the full week because I was also trying to squeeze in some other family stuff. I did have a couple of really big roadblocks with the light switch hole and figuring out the circuits and the splicing and the shared neutral circuit thing. But I think it turned out nice. I'll show you what the dual zone looks like when we do the Physique update at the end. That's the reason why I did that, was to be able to have a full lighting setting and then a special lighting setting for posing that is more dramatic and has more contrast and shadows. because we want to look good. All right, let's get the next set of lateral raises. Just so you can see what the lights end up looking like, I think, let's see, let me put it, so we're at 100% right now. Let me cut it to 50%. So that's 50%, and I don't know, what's really interesting about when you're filming, like the exposure adjusts to have the same brightness level, but I wonder how this looks to you all, knowing that the camera is having to increase its exposure settings. I feel like there's maybe a little bit more darkness back in the corners, and maybe that's okay because I don't really do anything back there. Here it is at 75%, and maybe this is all I need. Well, one thing I have noticed is there is a little bit of a when the lights are dimming, when they're in a dimmed position. So that's one of the reasons I've been opting for wide open at 100%. Number one, it's brighter. I work out in the morning, so brighter is actually better for me. Anything that can help me wake up. So this has actually been great this morning. I've had it at 100%. It's also nice in the winter because I think there is a little bit of heat coming off of them. And let me just show you, I did put a 25% setting just to see, just to play around with. So you can see the camera hasn't fully, or maybe it isn't fully able to. It's finally adjusted back up to the exposure setting, but you can definitely see it's darker in those corners. And again, maybe fine for filming, but I like the way that the 100% looks. It's definitely brighter, more energetic. And then the posing, what I did for the posing is I just have 4 lights here that remain on, the rest go off. And so it creates just really dramatic, shadowy type of thing. So I'm hoping that will make my muscles look really good. So we'll quit playing around and we'll finish up the weights. All right, last set, lateral raises. All right, we just have tricep pushdowns to finish off. We'll do our check in between those sets, and then we'll do a physique update at the end with our new fancy shadowy lighting and see how that works, if that helps or not. I forgot, I do have this LED panel just hooked up to, clamped onto a joist too, so I feel like by adding that also helps give my face a little bit of lighting when I'm talking. Here you can see what it looks like on, what it looks like off. Just feels like my eyes are like black dots. So I don't know, maybe they're still dark dots, but maybe that's a little bit better. I don't know. You tell me, let me know. I'm not a cinematography expert. My brother is, I'm not. So we do have to get these tricep pushdowns. I'm also interested to see, I don't know if this is gonna help during the posing or not, if it's gonna wash me out or if it's gonna add more contrast to the muscles. All right, tricep pushdown, set 1. Whoa. All right, real quick check-in. Let's look and see where we are. We weighed in at 191.2 this morning. I think that's a good start to this week. I'd like to see us getting at 190 or below, because last week our average was 191.3. So to hit our 2-pound goal, we need to be at 189.3 for this coming week. While we're talking about last week, 191.3 was my goal. That was Week 11, our first week after our deload and diet break, which was a higher weight and higher calorie week. But if we go back to week 9, the average is 191.3. That was what I wanted to get back to in week 11. So week 9, 191.3, deload, diet break, we kind of saw an increase. I wanted to get back to a baseline, and we got there. But now, when we have established our baseline again, I want to start making that progress. So that's when I want to start seeing that 2 pounds per week happening once again. So this week we're shooting for like that 189.3. For calories, we did decent last week. We averaged just over 1,800 calories. Let's see. We stayed under 1,600 for the first couple of days, so creeping up towards the end of the week. Ended up having a higher calorie, quote unquote, Saturday and Sunday, but in the grand scheme of things, still well under maintenance calories each of those individual days and well within our range. And I did that because I knew that we were getting back on track. So I won't go into all of the days that we met, like Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Just kind of look at yesterday. What we had was some protein cereal and our coffee, some high protein ramen noodles. I throw some shredded chicken in there for added protein and flavor, some beef jerky. My kids have these Cheez-It crackers for snacks, and it just looked so good. I had to have one. Some Greek yogurt, some dark chocolate because I was craving something sweet. For dinner, just some chili and a carrot. And then again, I was feeling good about the week. I knew my weights and my weigh-ins and my calories were on par, so I treated myself with some Halo Top sea salted caramel ice cream. And even with a couple of treats, Cheez-Its, chocolate, and Halo Top, was still able to get over 200 grams of protein. And that's part in thanks to having a little bit higher calories, almost 2,000. But more to the point, that's just over 10 grams of protein per 100 calories, which is the target that I try to hit or exceed. So all in all, I think a pretty good indication, especially coming off of the holiday break and the diet break, getting back into a good routine. One thing I'm trying to do today, I planned out all of my food for today so that hopefully what I can do is give you guys a video maybe tomorrow or soon of what I eat in a day, and to actually, rather than just looking at the app, I can actually show you the food. I'm just kind of guessing that might be helpful for some of you. If that is something that you're interested in seeing, let me know in the comments. But yeah, we're going to just continue our plan as normal. Basically what we were doing before the diet break. We're going to shoot for 1,800 to 1,900 calories this week and see how that, where that puts us on the scale. Hopefully it puts us at 189.3 or whatever, the 2 pound goal. And this is the week that we'll make a judgment call. If we don't hit that 2 pounds, I'll probably add a little bit of cardio just to help speed along the process, because we only have like 8 weeks left of this cut. All right, second set. We only have 2 sets of these tricep pushdowns. Here we go. All right, quick physique update. We'll do some posing. I'm not the best posing person in the world, but I will try to show the progress. It probably is a little bit of an unfair advantage comparing this week to last week because I do have the new lights. I do think this panel light over here helps. With just these 4 overhead lights, it's just almost a little too shadowy. So having that panel light over there Still gives me a little bit of contrast on this side while also giving more, showing more, I guess. I'll just show you what it looks like. So this is just the overhead lights. Lots of contrast. Maybe good for super dramatic things, but I think there's almost a little too much shadow under my pecs. So we'll push this back on, and I feel like you can just maybe see things a little better. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe in post, I'll look at that and say, nope, that's wrong. I also have these overhead lights at 50%. I may be able to bump those up if I need to. I'll stop yapping. And just some non-flexed. Making progress. We're losing some of this stuff, but still holding on to some. And if you know much about weight loss and fat loss, there's not much I can do to target this. I just got to keep going. It's got to stay in a calorie deficit. We've got to keep lifting the weights. Eventually, the fat will lose. Maybe I lose a little bit more fat off of my arms and my chest, and it kind of goes from here last. Eventually, it'll get burned. It might not get burned now, but hopefully in 8 weeks, we'll see a significant drop in what we've got down here and get a little bit more lower ab definition.